and to look away. And I'm reminded, I think one of the greatest men of the last century in the world, Martin Luther King, he said something very close to my heart. He said, never, never be afraid to do what is right. Society's punishments are small compared to the wounds we inflict on our souls when we look away. And today I'll be talking about looking away. I'll be talking about the wounds that we inflict daily, collectively, on our souls as the great, wealthy, aspiring, aspirational, consuming, producing, shining middle class of the world's second largest economy. Wounds that we inflict on our souls so large that I think we've left such a huge hole in our collective consciousness and conscience. Sometimes I think about, suppose I was born 100 years from now and I was trying to write about India today. What would I write? What defines the times that we live in? And it is really this capacity to see enormous suffering and inequality around us with so little discomfort. That, I think, is our most defining feature. And and I see this an evolution in my own thinking. The last 30, 40 years, whenever I've looked at what is wrong with the world, I have made demands from the state. I've thought about how we can change laws, how we can change policies, and I continue to believe that I will hold my state centrally responsible to correct what is wrong in the world. But what has changed in my mind and heart is that this state that we have, is basically located within us, within our normative frameworks. And we may make a law that no person is going to sleep hungry in this country. But that's not going to happen until we all believe that we must live in a society where no mother has to teach her child how to sleep hungry. And therefore, a just and caring state will never be a reality until we build or rebuild ourselves as a just and caring society. And so, talking about if I was imagining myself 100 years from now and writing about our times, there's something that I would call the exile of the poor from the conscience and consciousness of people of privilege. That's really what I was saying that I define. And you see it in many different ways. In the most obvious, just look at our cinema and how it has changed. In the films of the 50s and 60s, the cinema was populated by farmers struggling for his land, homeless people on the streets, workers fighting for their rights. Today, if you look at our cinema and try to understand India, you'd imagine that there are no poor people in this country. Everybody, we look at our television, look at our popular literature, our heroes. We have exiled the poor in a very dramatic and effective way from our conscience and consciousnness. Akhil Gupta is a scholar in Los Angeles, and he asked a very interesting question. He tried to calculate how many people die in India every year. of completely preventable causes. Largely, how many people die because they don't have money for health care, or they don't have enough food to eat, or they don't get clean water. Things that, that are completely preventable, that should not happen. You know what figure he reached? 2 million. 2 million people die every year, and it's a very conservative estimate. All he did was that he used Kerala's human development indicators and said that if the rest of the country had the same development indicators, what would be our survival rates, basically. And there's a lot that is wrong with Kerala. But even if we lay out that as an achievable standard for the rest of the country, we would have 2 million people more living every year. Now that number of people dying of completely preventable causes every year is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions. It outnumbers the death of people by every natural calamity, most wars, etc. And yet, the extraordinary thing is that it's not even an issue. We're going through a huge general election. How much is this a part of the conversation? Do you hear it at all? We hear about what we commit to make life better, fairer, more just for people of the greatest disadvantage. Is that really what we are talking about when we are imagining a good government? And somewhere he says, what has happened in our consciousness is the normalization of poverty. Basically what we are saying is that, we look around and we say, there are hills, there are mountains, there are forests, there are trees, there are poor people. They've always been around as part of this general landscape. They were there, they are there, and they'll continue to be. And it is unproblematic. And it happens, we say it with the casualness. The finance minister, Mr. Chidambaram, was asked, how long will it be before poverty goes in India? And he said very unproblematically, the year 2040. Mr. Monte Carvalho has also given exactly the same year. Now first, that their understanding of poverty is actually, the poverty line that they're talking about is closer to a starvation line. And they're quite comfortable with the idea that our economic policies and social policies are going to, we're not promising any living poor person in India today even the promise that their destinies are going to change in the foreseeable future, in most of their lifetimes. And it's not problematic. It is this lack of concern for what I think should be the central conversation in this country. That in a country of such extraordinary wealth, and the second fastest growing economy in the world, how long will we continue to accept this kind of inequality? And we teach inequality to young people in conscious and unconscious ways. Sometimes, in all our homes, probably everyone in this, we all have domestic help in our home. I often wonder how when you tell a small child of 4 कि बेटे सब बच्चों के सब बड़ों के पाँव छुओ, how does he know कि सब बड़ों में the domestic help is not part of it? How does he learn it that early? How does he know that this is one older person you can command, you can be rude to, you can't do to any other? So we have taught inequality, and we really need to think what messages we are communicating to our young people. Kim Hopper, I was speaking at NYU on the homeless recently, and there's a very fine, very loved teacher there called Kim Hopper, and he said something, responding to when I was talking about the homeless here. He said he over the years, because he's been teaching about homelessness in New York, to his students, he would ask them one question to recall: how did your parents introduce you to the homeless? Think back, the first time you saw homeless people on the streets, your parents would have to explain that to you. And he said there were 4 kinds of ways that people recalled. Most parents would quickly pull back the child, cover up, protect the child, communicating that these are dirty, dangerous people from whom you have to protect yourself. Some, he said quite interestingly, used it as a moment for sort of morality teaching, saying that this is what happens when you don't get good grades in school. This is where you land up. Some who were more progressive said this is the outcome of neoliberal policies and so on and so forth, and tried to explain this to their children. He said one colleague of his actually sat down and tried to explain to her daughter that this is just people who've had had bad luck, have had a difficult life. It could have happened to any of us. It could have happened to you. It could have happened to me. But he said that the girl recalls that when she said this, she started looking terrified, saying that can this also happen to me? And then she said no, but she hugged her and said no, but it will never happen to you. And I started thinking, when you see that the child on the traffic light whom Noam Chomsky observed, whom we cannot but see every day, many times, driving to work, coming back from a movie, what do we tell our children? What do we tell ourselves about this child? And when I came back to Delhi after I left the IAS 2002, I felt that this was one group of human beings I must engage with, because it symbolizes our indifference to the homeless child we see every single day, and our comfort with extraordinarily different destinies for our child and that child symbolizes to me what I think is the single thing that worries me most about our country. And I decided therefore that I would call for a group of young people, and we didn't have any idea what we'd do with them, but can we figure out? And I won't talk about this journey of 5 or 6 years, except that it has affirmed to me many things. And these kids are extraordinary in they've suffered more in 6, 8, 10 years than most of us suffer through many lifetimes. And yet their capacity to heal, to forgive, to rebuild, and they're performing well in school, bridged for lost years of schooling, and in many different ways. This morning I happened to be at one of the girls' schools. It was a small, they were having a celebration because every single girl had passed their examinations this year, or everyone had entered regular school. These are all children of disabled beggars. Actually, the beggars that you see when you go to Sai Baba on Thursdays and Nizamuddin Dargah on Fridays, and etc. Uh, Precisely those, they live in a place called Viklang Basti, and these are the children who used to beg with them. And in our care, I've seen how much they've blossomed and how much we are losing when we don't give children a chance. And these kids had just about a week, they had done their own performance. And I found that one of the kids had actually chosen a play called The Bishop's Candlesticks. And they performed. It just happened to be my favorite story when I was growing up as a child. And I loved the fact that they were telling this story to their parents in a sense. The parents was this group of disabled beggars. And my colleagues are really careful, and they've learned that they must be respected like any group of parents. And so they were the chief guests. And these children were performing the Bishop's Candlesticks, talking about how this bishop forgave somebody who came and stole his most precious candlesticks, and tried to cover up for him when the police came and said, no, I had gifted them my candlesticks, gifted him my candlesticks, and that changed that person's life. And these kids wanted to tell this story, and they did it so beautifully. I just watching them, I thought about what India could have been if we had just done one thing. If we resolved that every child in this country, every single child in this country must study together and must get exactly the same educational opportunities. If I was the Prime Minister, this is the one thing, and I could do only one thing. This is the one which could change India. And we panic so much when we had this very modest RTE requirement that elite schools will have in class 1 25% children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Instead of welcoming it, the elite schools all banded together. They employed a battery of the country's most expensive lawyers. They fought a very long case in the Supreme Court resisting this. And one of the principals actually, in an unguarded moment, actually said, it was quoted in the Wall Street Journal, she said, I can't handle the fact that the woman who is mopping my floors sits across the table from me as a parent. Why can't she handle it? Why can't we handle the idea that actually my child and my domestic help's child and a girl on the streets who is the daughter of a beggar can actually study together, become friends, learn from each other, and God forbid, maybe my domestic help's daughter will turn out brighter than mine. I remember Eklavya, who turned out to be brighter than the brightest of the princes, and how intolerable it was for us. I don't think we've changed fundamentally as a society. Not only have we not changed fundamentally, the idea of caste persists. We may not call it caste, but the idea, even friends who are very sympathetic to what we're trying to do, our kids are now turning 18. And I can get some support for kids up to the age of 18. But beyond 18, they say, but what are you trying to do? I mean, are you going to take care of them till they're... You might well then set up an old people's home in your mind as well. You'll keep them... I said, my daughter's 28 and she's still living with me. You don't seem to have a problem. I'm still supporting her master's and her PhD. That's not a problem. But the idea that for the poor, we say, usko to, after all, plumber banna hai, electrician banna hai, carpenter banna hai. Nothing wrong with being any of these. But the idea that the poor will always have to learn to work with their hands. थोड़ा बहुत तो पढ़ा लें, लेकिन बेसिकली तो वही उनको काम करना है. एंड द रिच, our kids will always learn to work with their heads.